Dr. Amy Pate, you're a senior researcher there at the University of Maryland, College Park.
I am, yeah.
Tell me how you ended up there in that setting.
Well, I was applying for grad schools. I narrowed it down to Emory and the University of Maryland, and I went to visit both campuses. And at the University of Maryland, they had a center called the Center for International Development and Conflict Management. And I met with a professor there, Ted Robert Gurr, who ended up being, he was on my dissertation committee. He was a real mentor to me. And really why I decided to go to Maryland instead of Emory is when I was at Emory, because they're affiliated with the Carter Center, which also does a lot of peace and development work, which is what I'm interested in. And I asked a professor about, do grad students get to work with the Carter Center? And they said, oh no, we discourage our graduate students from working in the policy realm. And I asked a similar question when I was at Maryland, because you're right outside of Washington, D.C. There are lots of think tanks and non-governmental organizations, and there's this research center. And I was like, and I asked Dr. Gurr, what are the opportunities for someone who wants to be able to be an academic and to do research, but also wants to be able to take that research and impact the world. And he started going on about all the opportunities they offered, through publications that they did for the policy community, through programs that the center did with practitioners in the field. And I was like, well, then this is the place for me, because I didn't want to stay up in an ivory tower.
Yeah.
I wanted the knowledge that I was gaining, be able to take it and impact the world.
Yeah.
And not just, keep it all hidden away.
So when you're working on your master's degree, you're already able to get started on some of this?
Yeah, I started off off the boot while I was picking up my master's on my way to the PhD, doing research for a project called Minorities at Risk, where we collected information on ethnic minorities, a lot of whom face discrimination, and that research is used by governments, and one of our biggest sort of audiences. We end up being used a lot by asylum lawyers who are working with clients who are fleeing persecution and helping, formatting our research in a way that's useful to them. So I started doing that my first semester.
Wow. And now you're a senior researcher.
Yep, I'm a senior researcher. It's a very long research center name. It's the National Consortium for the Study of Terrorism and Responses to Terrorism. We call it START for short.
I see, okay.
I tend to focus on the political instability and terrorism side. But we do, every year I'm on a different project, so there's lots of variety. So.
And probably get to travel a lot of different places, I suspect, as well.
A little bit, yeah. We're writing up a proposal now that would have me going back to West Africa, which is one of my regional areas of interest and expertise. So I've done some work there in the past, but this new project would have me going there and doing some interviews of people and looking at the risk for radiological and nuclear smuggling, which is actually not that interesting.
Okay, it sounds interesting.
It's an important topic about how you have governments that don't have a lot of control over their borders, and so bad things can be, drugs, people.
Right. All kinds of trouble.
All kinds of trouble. So figuring out what the threats are in that region of the world.
So that's important work and an important place that you're doing. How did you get prepared to go in a situation like that?
So the first time I did field research was a couple years ago. I did some conflict assessments, again in West Africa and Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire. I felt like I had slightly an edge over some of the other people because my parents had taken me to Cote d'Ivoire when I was... They're so brave. Who takes a 9-year-old? We know Robert and Judy Bryan, who were living there at the time, and they were good friends with my parents. I call them Uncle Robert and Aunt Judy. And so they picked us up, they took us to Europe, and then they took us my brother and me to Africa.
Wow.
And so, especially when I was going to Cote d'Ivoire, I was like, oh, I've been here before. I've met these people. I know, when you're 9, you're amazed by these sort of differences.
Right.
But in some ways, it's much easier as a child to just roll with it. You find the kids, they don't speak English, you don't speak French or whatever their tribal language is, but you still manage to, to play and have fun.
Right.
And so I think that that kind of early exposure that my parents allowed me to have by, taking me around the world instead of to Disney World.
Yeah.
Was crucially important, even in deciding what I was going to study.
Right.
And, that's when I started getting interested in international politics.
Mm-hmm.
You read up a lot on the country and the culture and the conflicts that you're going to be to looking at. I was calling people on the phone who were working with different organizations working on the ground there and interviewing them, pre-interviewing them before going out into the field.
Mm-hmm.
And you do, and again, I had a huge resource base because of Free Will Baptist Missions. I knew, I had tons of people I could talk to about, going to this part of the world and who'd lived there for 20 years. And, you make sure that your family's praying for you and that your church is praying for you. And then you just trust for the best.
There you go. Good. And it's worked out. It's worked out well.
Yeah.
Now, you went to the University of Miami up in Ohio?
Yeah, I went to Miami University in Ohio for undergraduate.
What led you in that direction?
Money.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, they invited me up for a scholarship weekend, and they ended up giving me a scholarship that paid all of my in-state tuition, room and board, and then some additional scholarship that helped take care of my out-of-state tuition. Mm-hmm. And at that point, they had all the programs I was potentially interested in majoring in. I knew I wanted to take some journalism classes, and they had journalism. I knew I was already interested in political science. I knew I wanted to major in political science, and they had political science classes. I knew I wanted to take Russian.
Yeah.
They had Russian classes.
Had everything.
They had everything, and they wanted to pay me to be there. It was only 5 hours away from home. My dad had some family then in Cincinnati, so it just all seemed to sort of come together for me to go there.
It's kind of a competitive school, isn't it?
A little bit, yes, can be.
Mm-hmm. So probably you had prepared yourself a bit in your grade school and preparatory work. What kind of suggestions you have for folks thinking they might do some things like that in the future?
Well, a couple of things. For people who are, like middle school, like young teenagers, you have to study. Mm-hmm. You have to do your homework. I took a lot of advanced placement classes, which put me in a really good position because it got through a lot of those core requirements for an undergraduate degree. So I had the freedom to take a lot of different classes and figure out what I wanted to major in, have multiple majors. But you can't just stay chained to the desk either these days. I mean, you need to go out and be involved in extracurricular activities, play sports, get involved in clubs, be involved in your church, find a cause that you're passionate about and volunteer for that cause. I didn't find my sort of volunteer passion much until I was in college when I started. We would get a van from one of the ministry centers and we would drive downtown and we'd work at a soup kitchen. That's those sort of poverty issues in the United States, one of the richest countries on earth, and we still have horrible poverty here. It's still something I'm really passionate about. My church up in College Park, we run a food bank, and we give out, every third Saturday, we give out boxes of food to people who need it. Find the cause you're passionate about and volunteer for that cause.
Get involved
and invest yourself in it.
Yeah.
So
good. Now, you've been in a lot of different places and,
yes.
and away from home and all. How is it you've been able to kind of hold on to your faith? What kind of advice do you give to others for that, staying strong in the faith and so forth?
So the first thing I did is, you find a church that people there will support you. I never would have been able to get through grad school without my church up in College Park. They support me through thick and thin. They know I don't have, and a lot of, where I live now, it's a city of transplants. There are not a lot of born and bred people in D.C. and that part of Maryland. They know I don't have family close by. And they're from the moment I walked into that, it was the first church I visited and I never went anywhere else. And they speak truth to you. They keep you grounded. They're there for you when you need it. I'm too far away from family to usually travel for holidays like Easter, but I
Yeah.
always have a place to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the number one. Find your, in undergrad, it was less a church and more a small group of friends that were that community of faith for me, that we had some studies together. But yeah, you can't do it on your own. You have to find the right people to surround yourself with to provide you the support that you need.
Very good, very good. And so you get that group of folks, a good church, and they tend to provide that support and challenge us when we might get off track a little bit and help us in. Anything else you think of you want to add or give to us today?
It's funny because in my Sunday school back in Maryland, about a couple of times a year, the Sunday school teacher is like, okay, we're going to go around and we're going to make sure everyone has their passion. Are you still doing, God gives us passions for a reason, and things touch us. God uses things and situations to touch us so that we can make a difference in those ways. And so just, having that gut check on a regular basis. And sometimes it's hard. It's easy to get in a rut.
Right.
And, be afraid that, I may need to be making a switch at this point, because that can be scary.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get tired of being where you're going. But if it's, it's like, do I still want to keep doing the same thing? But if it's what God has called you to do, it's what God has called you to do. And you just, you have to do that gut check and stay true to it. With the help of those people that you've surrounded yourself with that give you good advice, that, are the listening ear, and that smack you around when you need to be smacked around, maybe.
And keep going.
But keep going. Yeah, so it's all about being true to the passion that God has given you.
Well, Dr. Amy Pate, we're very proud of you, and we're glad that you're being faithful to the call that God's given you there at the University of Maryland and wherever else your START program there may lead you.
Yes, thank you very much.